Welcome to The Truth of the Times, Episode 7, People in the Sky. There are a lot of bold and even sensational claims made by videos floating around the internet trying to teach you something you didn't know. Did you know that monoatomic gold can heal you and give you super genetic powers? Did you know that the world will end in 2012? Did you know that the Earth is shifting into the fourth dimension? Probably not. Because these things are either hard to prove or made up, but these subjects really grab people's attention. Many people assume this stuff is true because there's so much data to back it up. But how much of this unseen information can you trust? Most people don't have the time to research this stuff. So, The Truth of the Times does the hard research for you. This show is dedicated to digging deep to the primary sources to show you how we can separate the fact from the fiction. Zeitgeist seemed like an obvious place to start. The film claims that Christ was not historical and a
plagiarization
designed to control people. It then claims that on 9/11, there was an elaborate staged event to get support to declare war. Then it switches gears again, completing the sensational trifecta by denouncing not just the fiat currency, but the entire monetary system. The director Peter Joseph then put on a second movie, offering the grand solution: abandon religion and build a cashless society where technology prevents crime by eliminating the possibility of committing them. This, of course, will be done by handing over your fiat currency to the Venus Project, with no mention of justice for those who died on September 11th, 2001. Smell a little fishy to you? Well, my friends and I decided to pool our knowledge and figure out how much of this stuff was provable and show people how reliable or unreliable Peter Joseph's information really is. We actually expected most of it to be true, but so far a lot of the more sensational claims have less than sensational evidence. Much of it either outdated, misquoted, or just plain wrong. So today's episode will cover the sun savior concept, the origin of Aquarius, and the evolution of Horus. Let's start with this statement here.
The sun, with its life-giving and saving qualities, was personified as a representative of the unseen creator or God. God's son, the light of the world, the savior of humankind.
Sure, people worship the sun, but did they think it was a savior figure? Peter Joseph cites his main source of information, Acharya S., in Chapter 3 of her book, Sons of God. Actually, the full title is Sons of God, Krishna, Buddha, and Christ Unveiled. Knowing this would have saved me a lot of time searching online, but I found a copy on Google Books where you can preview at least a few chapters, including Chapter 3. Here we are led to another book where Acharya S. got her information, and apparently the title, Christian Mythology Unveiled, by Logan Mitchell, published in 1842. Mr. Logan quotes the Greek historian Pausanias, who wrote The Description of Greece in the 2nd century. Pausanias verifies that indeed there is a temple where some Greeks worship the sun, who they have dubbed the Savior. But he also tells us that almost every single god in Greek mythology is also called Savior. Here, Pausanias reports on the Christians of his time. Men of the present day do not believe that the sun and moon are divinities, nor do they worship the other celestial natures, who are saviors and governors, leading back immortal souls and being those that fabricate and give subsistence to mortal souls. He goes on to list many of the saviors by name, mostly Jupiter. So yes, the Greeks at least thought the sun was a savior, but it would be more accurate to say that they thought nature as a whole was their savior.
Likewise, the 12 constellations represented places of travel for God's sun, and were identified by names, usually representing elements of nature that happened during that period of time. For example, Aquarius, the water bearer, who brings the spring rains.
During the Bronze Age, when the Babylonians named this constellation the Great One, the constellation aligned with the winter solstice, clearly not named for spring rains at the time. It represented their god Ea, or Enki. He was the god of crafts, water, intelligence, one could say craftiness, and creation. Probably why they thought he was so great. Aquarius is Latin for water bearer, which is what the modern version has evolved into. Aside from that, the general idea of the statement is right. Now to the heart of the debate. Let's look at Horus.
This is Horus.
Well, that's Horus, pronounced Heru in Egyptian, that's Aten, and that's Wadjet. All three of them merged over the centuries. Wadjet, the cobra, evolved into the Eye of Ra, who was also a major sun god in Egyptian mythology. This is the hieroglyph for Horus.
He is the sun god of Egypt of around 3000 BC. He is the sun anthropomorphized, and his life is a series of allegorical myths involving the sun's movement in the sky.
Horus was primarily the god of sky, hence the falcon imagery, and the god of war. Since he represented the sky, the sun and moon were said to be in him, the sun Aten or Ra being his right eye, and the moon his left. His life was not just about the sun, rather the entire sky. He also represented Lower Egypt, and stories of his life are allegorical of the battles between Upper and Lower Egypt. Peter Joseph admits this in the citation. He says the fundamental sky sun gods of Egypt were Osiris, Horus, and Ra. Because of the very large span of time, these and other gods flourished in Egypt, and there is considerable degree of overlap and permutation regarding the attributes and thus stories. Now he goes on to list several examples and states, in regards to these complex permutations overlaps, Zeitgeist the movie has encapsulated the general characteristics simply under the title of Horus. But, you know, taking 15 seconds to explain this in the film, that was simply too much effort, I guess.
From the ancient hieroglyphics in Egypt, we know much about the solar Messiah.
Just like in ancient Greece, Egyptian mythology boasts more than one savior figure. The child Horus, also known as Shed, which means illuminated, was called Savior, or more accurately, Protector, because he was supposed to keep people safe from dangerous animals like snakes and crocodiles. Osiris was also called a savior because he saved the souls of the dead. Using the word Messiah is probably just inflammatory poetic license. Traditionally, Messiah means anointed one and the future king of Israel, who will usher in the Messianic age, fulfilling the prophecies of Hebrew scriptures. But Egypt didn't have any such prophecy.
For instance, Horus, being the sun or the light, had an enemy known as Set, and Set was the personification of the darkness or night.
Actually, to the people of Upper Egypt, Set was the sun god. For some reason, he was demonized for a time by the Egyptians after the land was unified, and Set became the god of storms, darkness, the desert, and chaos. The rivalry between the two is based on the historical pharaohs who fought to rule over all Egypt. Set also became one of Ra's protectors, or savior if you're going to throw that term around so loosely, fighting off an evil snake demon known as Apep each night. In 1720 BC, Set even became the chief of the gods for a period of time. The changing roles of the Egyptian gods really had more to do with politics of the current rulers than the motions of the sun in the sky. Horus was more or less always portrayed as a noble figure, and Set was sometimes evil, but not nearly as malevolent as other Egyptian characters like Apep. Peter Joseph cites Albert Churchwood's book, The Origin and Evolution of Religion. Mr. Churchwood can't even get the genealogy correct, stating Horus and Set were twins, but Set was the brother of Osiris, making him Horus's uncle. Churchwood also claims that Horus and Set were the earliest of these primal powers. However, as we discussed in earlier episodes, prior to Horus coming on the scene, there was an even older sun goddess known as Wadjet, who evolved out of a cobra goddess. And before Wadjet, there was another solar deity who hunted from a boat, apparently hunting for Apep, another snake figure, who represented evil 1,000 years before Set. Churchwood does not cite any sources here, and even though he did graduate from university with a doctorate, it was in medicine. He may have simply copied the themes set down by Albert Pike and other Freemasons like himself, because this theme of smushing religions into each other where they do not belong seems to be an ongoing theme with these Freemason writers. Again, I am not saying Peter Joseph is part of a Freemason conspiracy. You can't just say that without some sort of proof. More likely, he hasn't even read any of the books cited by the people he cites. However, it is indisputable that many of the root sources for his controversial claims stem directly or indirectly from Masonic writings. Freemasons do claim that they have secret knowledge, or at least feign it. So it's not too surprising that they don't have any sources to quote or look at actual archaeology. I find it either ironic or perhaps dubious that Peter Joseph must draw information from the stereotypical man behind the curtain that he demonizes later in the film to support the claims of his film. Beyond that, let's leave speculation for later. As we wrap up this episode, please keep in mind that not everything in this film is false. But there's a big part of the story Peter Joseph isn't telling you. Join us next time when we crack open the Book of the Dead to learn more about the Egyptian tales of Horus and Set.